just a little forehead shine, you know.
What's
Hi guys, and welcome to this episode of Pop Culture. Today we have the lovely Zamantungwa Khumalo that is going to be helping us have a conversation regarding property and renting. Welcome everybody. Zama, if you want to just introduce yourself to the Babsis, Gusi Ubani, Wagepi, Dumengani. Yeah.
Hi everyone, Zamantungwa Khumalo. Thank you so much to the Pop Culture ladies for the invitation. So I'm the founder of All Things Property SA, and it literally started from Twitter and it's growing into this amazing thing where it really is about helping Abantu navigating their property journey, regardless of whether you are a buyer, whether you're a seller, whether you are a renter or a landlord. It's understanding Uguti, we are always going to be at different stages or parts of our property journey, and everybody's like part where they are is actually quite important.
Mina as a renter, like what are the things that are like my fundamentals that I need to know, that are either my rights that I'm allowed to fight for or debate about when umuntu is contractually trying to, you know, or when I'm application. Let's just start from like the application before I get the property moving in, and then the rules and regulations that keep me in the property. Like how do I navigate those 3 steps of the journey?
Because I nearly said read your lease agreement and then went a bit in depth with that, but actually understand your budget. I think a lot of people who are renting don't actually understand their budget. So the typical rule of thumb, certainly with really good agents and even good landlords, is, let's say for example, umuntu uhola 10,000 rands. You want a rental payment, rent shouldn't be more than a third of your salary. So you shouldn't be paying more than 3,000 rands for rent. That's the same rule that we use when we buy property. So you're almost allocating money for shelter. So whether you're renting or you're tenga, that's a good rule of thumb. Certainly when you're buying, it's relatively standard. I mean, there are ways you can try and bypass it. For a newbie, you almost can't. So you almost stick to a third of your salary. That's what's allocated for rental. If, for example, you're earning 10,000 and your rent for the place is 7,000, your application won't be successful. And the honest truth is you just cannot afford that place, because how are you getting to and from La Kona? Because there's also transport cost, udlani, because you must also buy food. What are you doing for entertainment? Because we're young millennials, we go out. So the people who are rejecting your application essentially are looking at that. So it's not even necessarily a gatekeeping are holy enough, although there's a separate conversation about certainly property rental prices in Cape Town, because Leonje, that's a separate thing altogether. As a general rule of thumb though, is if it's more than a third, you can't afford it. So when you understand your finances, you go, okay, that's in 10K. And now when I start searching online and I go to the different websites where I can search for my rental property, the filter, what's your budget. Literally we are up to 3,000 and then you start looking. And you can start looking from smallest to highest to help, ease the goal and the anxiety of the search. But don't be going over 3,000, because I think it would also be quite negligent for a landlord to sign you up as their rent is 8,000 but 10,000, because you're not going to be able to make ends meet. Like I can almost guarantee you now, unless then the other way that you're actually able to almost mitigate that is, let's say Nitola a 2-bed apartment, and that 2-bed apartment is 6,000 rands. Then we ask you to know, Bongeka, Nami, no THEMBE, we're going to come together, we're going to live in this apartment. Then your application is looked at differently, because we're going to, okay, go to where 7 are full-time employed, that big pay slip, you actually can afford it. So then that's a different dynamic altogether. And if anything, it's probably the first pro tip is, if you're renting, do consider sharing. If I look at, for example, Joburg, you'll find Uguti, let's say a 2-bed, even in the north, can go from anything from Futima Jama rental prices. They say it can go anything from like 6K, let's say up to 10K. They can obviously go over 10K, but I want to keep it to like a nice number, right? Those people are no, guys. Yeah, I feel like Never mind Upila on Monday. It's the price we're paying for not having an ocean, actually. That's the price we're paying for not having an ocean. Nina ni patala lama prices ona patala because you got a mountain and the ocean and you like running on a bar.
Crazy.
So now you taxi and ama rental prices are high. So I think when you share, I mean, I did this, right? Where went from staying at home, then you had raised at some point, then living alone at some point, and then with a friend, we both needed a place that's like in the Joburg North. The rental prices were quite hectic. I mean, they were pretty steep, and we probably may have been able to afford it individually, but it would have we wouldn't have been able to like save or do other things. And then we found a 2-bed together and moved into the North. And I think one of the big things about being able to share or being open to sharing is you're also able to access suburbs that you wouldn't have been able to access if you're going at it alone, right? Because in the example, if you're able to get that apartment that is, let's say, 6K, and let's say it's in a posh part of like Joburg, for example, you wouldn't have been able to access it if Bohambi won because your salary is 10K and you can only afford 3K. Kandemani too, now you're living in the burbs, now you can do pack run because it's like literally a walk away from where you stay. You can do all these nice bougie things that you might want like access to, but you're also more likely to be closer to work because I think we also mustn't downplay part of the big thing when we're searching for where to live is you want it to be as close to work as possible. Some of the apartments might maybe make you pay for in storage. Yeah, or no, not the levy. A tenant doesn't pay for the levy. That's on the owner's account. So the line items, consumption-based line items, like even the garbage collection. In like, for example, with a complex center, like when you look at your levy statement, there's a line item for the garbage thing, and then the storage amount. So the landlord can make you pay that because that's consumption-based, but not a levy that the body corporate charges. So sometimes you'll find with Mabati rental 3,000. That's not the only amount you're going to be paying per month because there are going to be those other line items. Masabat niggas are like your monthly statement. You must pay X amount. So you must almost budget that in. And if anything, you must ask those things. So I think let's maybe go to like the second thing. Ask questions. Ask questions about what you're going to be paying, what's on your account. Let's say, for example, there is like uncapped Wi-Fi. Is it inclusive of the rental? Or you're going to have to pay it. Some of the landlords use that as a nice way to get young professionals to be like, it's inclusive. So they are paying the Wi-Fi, but you don't have to cover it. So understanding what do you have to pay is so important. And as Katinusim, you'll find that's actually included in your lease agreement, which is okay. Now, number 3, read your lease agreement.
But they're so long, Zama. They're so long.
English.
Yeah.
Also, the thing is the jargon in the thing, like, and I mean, even just for us on our journey, anything that's contractual, we always like, Bongeka, please take it over, babes. Now, in my real life, I don't have Bongeka to read the papers on my behalf. So, like, there's no contract for dummies or lease for dummies. Like,
or is there a resource that is out there that reads contracts and can like decipher them? Like, like the tax thing where there's like multiple taxmen that do like for 100 rand, they'll do your tax for whatever. Is there somebody like that can read my contract and be like, okay, Lalel, but 1, 2, 3.
I don't know of such a person. When I get really hectic legal documents, I have a call a friend. There's certainly like attorney friends I can reach out to be like, hey, can you go through this? But the thing is, even before Uti call a friend, see what you don't understand, right? Because I think the mistake that a lot of people actually do is they just don't read it. They literally initial, and then signing, they hand over. You don't understand what you have just signed. So yes, it's intimidating. Yes, it's wrong. Mara, read it. The parts that you don't understand, ask your agent. Be like, okay, what do you mean here? Because I think you can't ask what you don't know, and you won't know because of you just want to initial at the bottom and send it through. The agent can't force you to sign it, for example, on the spot. Let's say you see a place and you really like it. They can't force you to sign a place on the spot. And to be quite honest, don't do that, right?
Yeah.
View a place, go think about it. There are always going to be places. There are always going to be places. There's so much rental stock on the market, Konamanja, that you don't have to feel like, yo, I must sign this thing now. No. And then any agent who pressures you, then you must think, okay, there must be something going on, Lana. Actually, and I think before we even go too deep to the contract, one of the things you should also look for is when you're doing your search on the like websites that you use, look at how many units, for example, are in the complex that you want, because you're sometimes able to see the outside, which, oh, it's this one, because then it gives you a sense of the demand. Then you won't feel pressured. You get to know, Lena, it ticks all my boxes, I must get it now. The moment you do that, you see, no, actually there are like 30 others. They're on the same road or just like 2 streets away. So you don't have to feel pressure because there'll be agents who want to do that and be like, get it done, don't do it. So I think understanding the lease agreement is so important. Don't sign things you don't understand. I mean, whether it's renting or even buying, and we'll get to buying, do not sign things you don't understand. There are people there, in this case, it's the agent. They are supposed to literally explain that stuff to you all the time. Maybe sometimes there might be a clause that's there that you don't want. Then have it excluded. You know, you're able to do that. To be like, Lena Nifuni, you scratch out, you initial, the owner, the landlord will also initial to indicate it's okay, this one, subin. So the moment you understand the lease agreement, then you're going to be sorted. Because then you'll also understand the big deposit. I know Leo is such a contentious,
it's contentious also just in trying to get it back. Because that's my thing. It's like paying the rent. It was good and fine when you needed me to pay the rent on time. Now I'm trying to get out of your place and now I want my money back. And now all of a sudden it's not as easy to get that money back. Like,
And then, so legally they're not allowed to do that. So let's say now you've been looking for a place, you understand your budget, you've now found a place, it's 3,000 rands, you've now read your lease agreement, you understand your lease agreement, and you're clear on any terms that they've used, you understand it. One of the things that you should actually insist on as a tenant in the event where it's not done, a lot of the reputable agents always do it. A lot of the good landlords who understand the importance of it also do it. In the event where you find one or deal with an agent, insist on a entry inspection, right? And the entry inspection is so crucial. So what would typically happen in an entry inspection, so this is now on the day where you're going to be moving in. Typically, like it's when you're actually going to be moving in. Nyangena, you look for any faults that you can spot in the apartment. Literally, okay, and one of the things, open all the taps, make sure yazvula, okay, ziyasebenza, happiness, turn on the lights, okay, wonka yasebenza, happiness. If you can, 30 phone, the charger, fagama plug-in, you won't get to see all these plugs working, happiness. Literally do that all the rooms. So let's say it's a 2-bed, you are doing that in every room, checking which that stuff works.
Is that something that you're doing with the agent?
Yes. So entry, So an entry inspection you're doing with the agent.
And how granular do you do this? Like if there's a crack in the wall, are you noting that? Like how detailed do you need to be?
So there are 2 different types of defects that you typically get in an apartment. Lay one is where, let's say, the tenant is the one who's broken something. Then the second one would be, it's a structural thing, right? So things like, let's say, a crack, that you can't cause a crack unless, like, let's say somebody was, let's say like Boyz, you know how sometimes bazopuli bonda, and you can see it, you know, Lena, it's not a crack, like somebody hit something that you can note. But if it's just like a crack, typically that's not something you would necessarily jot down when you're renting, because that's not a flaw that a tenant would ever have to cover. As a tenant, you're basically looking out for anything that, let's say, move out, that they can say, so those are the kind of flaws that you're essentially looking out for, right? So even opening, like literally vula all the doors of the kitchen cabinet, vula all the drawers, vula in the bedrooms, vula ma wardrobe wonke, see uguti, is everything that's supposed to be working the way ni bege ngakhona essentially working. Mabone rolato, vulu rolato, ivale, okay, yes, yeah,
chipped tiles and stuff like that, all of it.
Yeah. And then what would typically happen in that inspection is, let's say there are certain things, even now as the tenant, as the agent in his bonayo, they create a snag list, and they even like take pictures of, oh, okay, yeah, Lena, sivule the cupboard door, say, I want to know, yeah, Lena, or they'll take a picture, Then they'll have a snag list. Now they have proof of the state of the apartment when you moved in. You both sign on it. As continuously, you're able to say the landlord has to fix certain things. Because sometimes in Fambe, it's the shower door, and you obviously can't be living there for the next year because maybe the water will come out, whatever. So those things must be communicated, like they typically even written on the thing, the landlord must fix XYZ, XYZ. Fantastic. One of the important things about doing an entry inspection is, and I'll skip to the end, we'll come to the middle, is because when you leave, you're also then going to do an exit inspection. And when you do the exit inspection, it's literally the same thing that happens. And let's say, for example, nothing broke, you are able to leave the place exactly the same way that you found it, then happiness, that's when you'll be able to get your deposit, basically, as it is with interest, because they're supposed to put it in an interest-bearing account. But in the event, for example, where uhlalile and in like you literally like wreaked havoc on the place. Manage the exit inspection, they will note, okay, no, and then the agent will typically say you must sign for it, and the fixtures for that would come from your deposit. So if deposit is not there to be treated as a rental. That's why you must still pay that last month's rental, and all the lease agreements, for example, would have them. You must still pay the last month's rental. It cannot be used as in the form of a deposit. It's because legally, actually, you're not. You almost have to sign another document to see that. We're certainly seeing it during COVID, where abantu are not able to make their full rental or part of their rental, and so you want to utilize the deposit. Then landlords literally will give you like a document, a legal document to sign to be like, they must use X portion of the deposit. My deposit is not there for rental, and that's why they can't use it, right? So entry and exit inspections is hambelana kanjalo. And that's why it's important to, because if I enzanga, for example, and let's say when you moved in and there were certain things that are not working, and then now too late, you don't say anything, you're just like, whatever, keep it moving. That's when it's time to move out, manji landlord, and there's some landlords do this, told Naibegas, this thing really wrong in my place, but Lona Agasins. Then they're able to be like, no, but this and this and this and this is broken. They're going to use it from your deposit. And then go by a mess. Because the thing, even as a tenant, you don't know where you can go when your landlord is just having you go over deposit. Because you can go to the rental housing tribunal and basically fight them, like isn't them being the landlord. But a lot of people don't know about it. It's kind of thing, you're just so over it. You're just like, let me just keep it moving. It's fine. But it's a lot of money. It's, if let's say you're staying in a 6,000 Rand apartment, that's 6K. And then sometimes landlords are now asking for a month and a half or 2 months deposit. So I say, and even if it was like 2,000, that's your money actually. So you must get it back. And then during your stay as a renter, it's really important to communicate, whether you're communicating with the agent. So this isn't the event where the landlord has kept the agent and they are the middleman, or you now deal directly with the landlord. If isn't a break, let them know, especially because the thing isn't it's wear and tear. So there's provision even in the law around wear and tear, because some of it is just normal wear and tear. It's not like a damage that you made. And so Lapo, you won't be liable. You're letting them know, listen, this has just happened, or this needs fixing. So things like, and then there are things that certainly as a tenant will never fall on you to fix, like you have no obligation to fix them. So something like a burst geyser will never fall on the tenant to fix. That's something that always falls on the landlord's cost. Sometimes it might happen with your landlord, I don't know, let's say they are on, because I'm a hiker, I'm on like a 10-day hiking thing, the signal is so terrible, and I'm like, okay, the plumber can come in, maybe pay them, or make an arrangement, because you've certainly seen relationships where sometimes you almost take over the place, and if you want to do something, let's say even paint, because you're not allowed to paint your apartment, but you've been staying there for a couple of years, you and the landlord have a really great relationship, and they're like, okay, no, that's fine, you can paint that one wall a gray that you want, that's okay. But you're not allowed to do those kind of changes to like somebody's property. And then just keep open communication. I mean, I know not every landlord, unfortunately, is warm and open to open communication, but you want to keep that as much as possible. If you have a conversation with your landlord and they agree to certain things, email them. I mean, I feel like Sis Batala, we've been working on the importance of emailing something that we've verbally had a conversation about, because you also don't want to end up in a he said, she said situation. I think property is one of those things I think, unfortunately, has not been accessible to Tina as abantu abamnyama generally, and certainly as Black women specifically. And I think as certainly like professional Black women, us being able to access property becomes such an important thing, because our mothers or our grandmothers weren't able to access it. So now more than ever is probably the time when we certainly can legally access it. But then there's like the financial barrier to accessing it. But we'll get into that a little bit.